The call came in at 2:47 in the morning, on a Tuesday in March. I remember because I had just looked at the clock on the dispatch console, the way you do when you are trying to calculate whether you can get through the last 4 hours of a shift without your eyes crossing. I'd been dispatching for Garrett County for almost 11 years by then, and the overnight rotation was something my body had never fully accepted. You don't get used to it. You just get better at functioning inside the tiredness. The board had been quiet for about 40 minutes. One active unit was sitting on a traffic stop out near the Pinnacle Rock overpass, and another was doing a welfare check on an elderly man whose daughter had called from Tucson because he wasn't answering his phone. Normal Tuesday. Cold outside, maybe 31 degrees. The kind of night where nothing happens or everything does. When the call hit the board, I picked up the way I always do. Garrett County 911. What is the address of your emergency? There was a pause, then a sound I initially took for wind. Not static exactly, but a kind of hollow ambient noise, like an open line in a room with bad acoustics. I repeated the prompt. Garrett County 911. Can you tell me your location? Nothing, or almost nothing. There was something underneath the silence that I couldn't identify. Not breathing, not background noise in any way I could categorize. Just a texture to the air on the line, like the call was physically somewhere. I pulled up the ANI data. That is the automatic information that comes in with a 911 call, the caller's number, and when available, the location the call originated from. The number came back to a landline. That was unusual in itself because by that point in my career, maybe 5% of our calls came from landlines anymore. But it was the address that made me sit up. 14 Garrity Lane. I knew 14 Garrity Lane, not because I'd been there on a call. I knew it because my grandmother had lived there for 38 years, and I had spent every summer of my childhood in that house from the time I was 4 until I was 16, when she had her first stroke and moved to a care facility in Cumberland. The house sat empty for 2 years after that. Then my mother and her brother fought about it for another 3, and eventually the county condemned it due to structural neglect. It was demolished in 2019. I know the exact date because I drove out there the week after and sat in my car looking at the empty lot. There was nothing left but a gravel depression and a severed water pipe sticking up out of the ground like a finger bone. It was now 2025. That house had been gone for 6 years. There was no structure at that address. There was no landline at that address. There hadn't been active utility service to that lot since the county pulled the permits. I flagged the call and tried the line again. Garrett County 911. Is someone there? This time I heard something that I almost dismissed, but couldn't. It was faint, buried deep under that hollow ambient tone, and it sounded like a child speaking, not screaming, not crying, just talking, at a conversational volume, in a room that didn't exist, in a house that wasn't standing. I could not make out the words. The cadence was steady, almost rhythmic, like a child reciting something, or explaining something to someone who was listening patiently. It lasted maybe 6 or 7 seconds, and then it stopped, and the line quality shifted, and I was holding dead air again. I want to be clear about something. I am not a person who is easy to unsettle. I have taken calls from people who were dying. I have listened to a woman burn to death in a car, while I kept her talking until the fire crews arrived too late. I once stayed on the line for 43 minutes with a man who had shot his wife and was deciding whether to shoot himself, and I talked him into putting the gun down, and I didn't shake until I got home 3 hours later. This job makes you into a specific kind of person, or maybe it finds people who are already that kind of person. Either way, I do not spook easily. But I knew that address. I knew what was there, which was nothing. And I knew what I'd heard on that line, which was a child in a room. I followed protocol. I logged the call as a 911 open line with possible audio contact, and I flagged it for a unit. Deputy Soren Meck picked it up. Soren was a decent guy, mid-40s, former Marine, not the type to complain about a late-night drive to check on an empty lot. I gave him the address and told him it was coming back to a landline at a location that I believed was currently vacant. I did not tell him the house had been demolished. I did not tell him it was my grandmother's address. I don't fully know why I withheld those things. I think part of me wanted to see what he reported back without any contamination from what I was already feeling. It took him about 14 minutes to get there. I know because I watched his unit icon crawl across the map on my screen, like I was tracking a surgery. When he keyed up his radio, his voice was completely normal. Dispatch. I am 10 to 23 at 14 Garrity Lane. There is no structure here. It is an empty lot. No vehicles, no persons visible. Do you want me to walk it? I told him yes. He acknowledged and went quiet for a few minutes. I could hear his boots on gravel through his open mic. Then he came back. There is nothing here. Lot's empty. Looks like there was a house here at some point. There is an old foundation line and some utility remnants. But there is nothing standing. No signs of activity. You want me to mark this as an abandoned call? I told him to stand by. I went back to the call log and replayed the audio. Our system records all incoming 911 calls automatically. I pulled up the file. The call duration showed as 1 minute and 51 seconds. I put on my headset and played it back. The first 30 seconds were what I remembered. The open air, the hollow tone, my prompts going unanswered. But then, at around the 50-second mark, there was the child's voice again. And this time, because I was listening through a headset in a quiet room and not managing an active board, I could hear it more clearly. It was a girl. She was saying something about the water. The water is coming up through the floor. That is what I heard. Not panicked, just observational. Like she was reporting a fact to someone she trusted. And then, very faintly underneath her voice, I heard a second voice. An adult woman. I could not make out words, but the tone was calm, and the cadence was reassuring. The way you talk to a child when you are trying to make something scary feel manageable. I sat there for a long time. I don't know how long. Soren radioed again to ask if he should clear the call, and I told him yes. Mark it as an unfounded 911, probable system error. He cleared and moved on. I finished my shift. I drove home. I sat in my kitchen and drank coffee that I didn't want because I had no idea what else to do with my hands. Here is what I did not tell Soren, and have not told anyone until now. When I was 8 years old, my grandmother's house flooded. Not from a storm, but from a failure in the water main that ran under Garrity Lane. It happened in the middle of the night in July. I was sleeping in the back bedroom, the one my grandmother called the summer room because it only had a window unit and was too cold to use the rest of the year. I woke up because my feet were wet. The water was coming up through a crack in the foundation, just barely, a thin skin of it spreading across the floor in the dark. I wasn't scared yet, just confused. I walked out into the hallway and found my grandmother already up, already calm, already moving towels toward the back of the house. She looked at me and said, in that voice she had, the one that was made of warm iron, "It is just water, Ellie. Water always finds the lowest place. We'll send it back outside where it belongs." Ellie. That was what she called me. Nobody else did. My name is Ellen. We spent the rest of that night on the porch while a county crew fixed the main. My grandmother wrapped me in a quilt and told me the history of every house on Garrity Lane, who built them, who lived in them, who left. She told me that houses hold onto things, and that is not a haunting, it is just what houses do. They're like sponges, she said. They soak up the years. I carried that night with me for a long time, not as trauma, as warmth. It was one of the last good summers before her health started to go, and before my mother's drinking got bad enough that the summers stopped being an escape and started being a custody arrangement. So when I heard a child on a 911 call from that address talking about water coming up through the floor, you need to understand what that did to me. It wasn't fear. It was something worse than fear. It was recognition. I spent the next 3 days telling myself it was a system error. Landline databases are not always current. Numbers get recycled. Records lag. Ghost entries persist in alley databases for years after a line is physically disconnected. I've seen calls route to wrong addresses. I've seen Annie data pull up locations that no longer exist because the phone company never updated the Master Street address guide. These things happen. They are explainable. I explain them to myself repeatedly, in the car, in the shower, in bed at 3 in the morning, when I was not sleeping. On Friday, I went back to the recording. I had access to it through our records management system, and I played it again, this time on better speakers, with the ambient noise in the room as low as I could get it. I listened to the whole 1 minute and 51 seconds 4 times. On the third listen, I caught something I had not heard before. After the woman's voice fades, in the last few seconds of the call before the line disconnects, there is a sound. It is so faint that I had to turn the volume almost to maximum, and I still wasn't sure. But it sounded like a door closing. Not slamming, closing gently, the way you close a door when a child has just fallen asleep. That particular sound, the soft latch, the slight settle of wood in a frame, it is one of the most specific sounds in the world. And I knew that door. My grandmother's back bedroom had a door that never hung quite right, and it made a particular sound when you closed it carefully, a sort of two-part click where the latch caught and then the frame shifted a millimeter. I used to hear it every night when she checked on me before she went to bed. I closed the file. I logged out of the system. I went home and I called my mother, which is something I hadn't done in about 4 months. She picked up on the 6th ring and she sounded the way she always sounds now, half present, a little slurred, not drunk exactly, but permanently softened around the edges by years of being drunk and then years of being on medication for not being drunk. I asked her if she remembered the night the water main broke on Garrity Lane. She was quiet for a long time, and then she said, "You were so little. You came out of that room with wet feet and you weren't even scared." She was just like that with you. She could make anything feel safe. I asked her why she never visited the house in those last years before the demolition. She got quiet again, and this time I could hear something working in the silence, something she didn't want to hand me but couldn't hold back. "I couldn't go back there," she said. "After she died, I couldn't walk through that door without feeling like she was about to come around the corner, and I knew she wasn't going to, and I couldn't keep learning that, so I let it go. I let it all go." My grandmother died in 2016. The house was demolished in 2019. My mother never went back after the funeral. I went back once, the week after the demolition. None of us said goodbye to that house while it was still standing. It just got old and unwatched, and then it got taken down, and we all pretended that was the county's fault and not ours. I didn't call my mother to tell her about the 9/11 call. I don't know what I called her for. Maybe just to hear someone else say my grandmother's name. 2 weeks later, it happened again. Same E-shift, same dead hours, 3:11 a.m. The board lit up with an incoming call from the same number, same address, 14 Garrity Lane. I picked it up, and this time I didn't speak. I just listened. The hollow ambient tone was there again, but it was different now, warmer. That is the only word I can use. The first call had sounded like a room in winter, empty and resonant. This one sounded like a room in summer, with the particular quality of air that you get when a window is open, and the heat outside is pressing gently against the screens. I know how that sounds. I know you can't hear a season, but I heard it. The child's voice came back, clearer this time, close to the phone, as though she were standing right next to wherever the call was originating from. She said, "Grandma says it is okay to leave the light on. She doesn't mind." Then silence. Then the line dropped. I sat at my console and I cried. Not dramatically, not with sound. Just water running down my face while I stared at a screen, full of unit icons and open call logs, and the small, ordinary machinery of other people's emergencies. That was something I used to say. Every summer, I'd ask my grandmother if I could leave the hallway light on because the back bedroom was dark and I could hear sounds from outside, the kind of rural sounds that a kid from a suburban apartment didn't have any framework for. Frogs and insects and things moving in the tree line. She always said the same thing. "Leave it on, I don't mind." That light's been on more years than you've been alive. I didn't flag the call for a unit. I didn't dispatch anyone. I logged it as a test call, system maintenance, which is something we can do for administrative lines that ping the 9/11 system accidentally. I falsified a record. I have never done that before. I did it because I could not bear the thought of someone else going out to that empty lot and telling me again that there was nothing there. I knew there was nothing there. That was not the problem. The third call came 1 week later, same number, same address. This time I was not on shift. My colleague Ray Pullen was working the overnight board. He logged it as an open line 911 from a vacant address, probable database error, and he flagged it for it to review the alley records. He told me about it the next day in the break room, offhandedly, the way you mention a weird thing that happened on a shift that was otherwise boring. He said there was no audio on the call, just dead air for about 45 seconds, and then a disconnect. I asked him if he was sure there was no audio. He gave me a look, the kind of look dispatchers give each other when one of them is being weird about a routine call. He said, "Yeah, just dead air." Why? I told him I'd had a similar call from the same address a couple of weeks earlier and was just curious. He shrugged and said it was probably a bad record in the phone company's system and that it would clean it up. Then he went back to his sandwich. I went into the record system that afternoon and pulled up the audio from Ray's call. I listened to all 45 seconds of it. He was right. There was no voice. No child, no woman, just the hollow open line tone, steady and featureless. But at the very end, in the last 2 seconds, before the disconnect, there was a sound. Very soft. Almost imperceptible. It was a creak. The kind that old houses make when the temperature shifts, when the wood is expanding or contracting. A settling sound. The kind of sound that a house makes when it is just being a house, doing nothing, holding its shape against the night. Except there was no house. I started driving out to Garrity Lane, not every day, maybe twice a week, always in the evening, after my day shifts or before my overnight rotation. I'd park where my grandmother's driveway used to be, which was now just a slightly flatter stretch of gravel at the edge of the lot, and I'd sit there. I wasn't waiting for anything. I wasn't expecting to see something. I was just sitting in the last place where something I loved had physically existed. The lot looked the way abandoned lots look in rural counties. The gravel was being slowly eaten by crabgrass. The old foundation line was a faint rectangle of discoloration in the soil, barely visible unless you knew where to look. The water pipe stub was still there, rusted nearly to the ground now. The neighboring houses, both occupied, sat at enough distance that the lot felt isolated. A gap in the street, like a missing tooth. I noticed something on my 4th or 5th visit. It was late afternoon, early April, and the light was coming in low and amber from the west. The lot was in partial shadow from the tree line that ran along the back of the property, and standing at the edge of the old foundation line, looking down at where the front step would have been. I felt something under my feet. Not physically. Not vibration or heat or any sensation I can name with a word that belongs to the body. It was more like a density, like the air at ground level was heavier there, like something was pressing up from below, not with force but with presence. I stepped back and it was gone. I stepped forward again and it was there. It wasn't frightening. It was the opposite of frightening. It felt like standing in a warm room. I went home and didn't sleep. The next morning, I called the county clerk's office and asked to see the demolition records for 14 Garrity Lane. I don't know what I expected to find. The clerk, a woman named Deborah who I dealt with on warrant paperwork, pulled the file and let me look through it. Standard demolition, asbestos abatement first, then mechanical teardown, then debris haul and lot grading. Everything signed off, everything normal. Except for one thing, the final inspection report. The one filed by the county building inspector after the demolition was complete, had a handwritten note at the bottom of the last page. In small, careful letters, someone had written, "Basement not fully filled. Partial void remains beneath grade. Recommend follow-up." There was no record of a follow-up. I asked Deborah about it, and she looked at the note and shrugged. She said it probably meant they didn't backfill the basement completely, that there was a gap or a cavity underground where the old cellar had been. She said it wasn't uncommon with older homes, especially if the budget for the demolition was tight. They knock down the house, haul the debris, grade the surface, and whatever's underground stays underground. Sometimes there is a void. Sometimes it collapses on its own over a few years. Sometimes it just sits there. A void. That word stayed with me. A space under the ground where the house used to have its lowest room. Still there. Still shaped like the basement I used to sit in on hot days, where my grandmother kept her canning jars and her husband's old tools, and a chest freezer that hummed so loudly you could hear it through the floor. A room that no one had filled in. A room that was, in some structural sense, still a room, still enclosed, still holding its shape. I know what you are thinking. You are thinking, I went back with a shovel. I didn't. I went back with a chair, a folding camp chair from my garage. I drove out to the lot on a warm evening in late April. I set the chair up in the center of where the house used to be, approximately over where the living room would have been, and I sat down. I didn't bring my phone. I didn't bring anything to do. I just sat there in the open air, on an empty lot, in a chair, and I waited for nothing. The first 20 minutes were nothing. Wind and birdsong and the distant hiss of tires on the county road a quarter-mile south. Then the sun got low enough that the light changed, and the shadow of the tree line moved across the lot, like a slow tide, and something shifted. I could hear the house, not with my ears. I want to be very precise about this. I did not hear sounds in the air. What I heard was more like a memory that was coming from outside of me, like the lot itself was remembering, and I was close enough to pick it up. I heard the screen door, that aluminum screen door that never sat right in its frame and would bang if you didn't catch it. I heard the kitchen faucet, which had a particular whine when you turned it to hot. I heard the floor in the hallway, the third board from the bathroom, the one that creaked no matter where you stepped on it. I heard my grandmother singing. She used to sing while she cooked, not full songs, fragments, verse and a half of something, then humming, then a different song entirely. She told me once that she didn't know the endings of most songs because her mother had only ever sung the beginnings. I sat in that chair, and I listened to a house that didn't exist play back the life it had held. It wasn't a haunting. I need you to understand that. Nothing about it was cold or wrong or frightening. It was like sitting inside a memory that had become weather, local and specific and warm and impossible. After about an hour, it faded. The sounds, which were not sounds, dimmed and then stopped. And I was sitting in a field again, in a folding chair, in the dark, and the frogs were starting up in the drainage ditch along the road. I went home. I didn't tell anyone. The fourth call came 3 days later. I was on shift, 2:19 a.m., same number, same address. I picked up the line and I said very quietly, "I am here." The child's voice came immediately, closer than before, clear enough that I could hear the breath between words. She said, "The porch light is still on." And then the woman's voice, my grandmother's voice. "I am certain of it now, and I don't care if certainty is irrational," said. "It stays on, sweetheart, so you can always find your way back." The line held for another 10 seconds. I could hear the summer room. I could hear the particular hum of that window unit that was always just slightly too loud, the one that vibrated the glass in the frame if you didn't wedge a folded washcloth into the corner. I could hear the settling of a house at night. All of it coming through a phone line connected to a number that had been disconnected for 6 years, from an address where there was nothing but grass and gravel and a void in the earth, where a basement used to be. Then the call ended. I sat at my console, and I pressed my hands flat on the desk, and I breathed. The board was quiet. No one was watching. I had about 40 seconds of total privacy before the next call could come in, and I used those 40 seconds to be a person who had just heard her dead grandmother's voice on a 911 line, and to feel what that actually felt like, which was not grief exactly, but something more like homesickness, a longing for a place that still exists somewhere, just not anywhere I can drive to. I logged the call as a system error. I flagged the alley record for review, knowing that it would eventually clean the old landline entry out of the database, and the calls would stop routing to our center. I was the one who set that in motion. I was the one who made sure it would end. The IT review happened 2 weeks later. They contacted the phone company, confirmed the line had been inactive since 2018, and had the record purged from the 911 routing database. The alley entry for 14 Garrity Lane was deleted. If a call were somehow generated from that number now, it would not reach us. It would go nowhere. It would ring into a system that no longer acknowledged the address existed. I went back to the lot one more time after that. A Saturday afternoon in May, I brought the chair again, and I sat, and I waited. But it was different. The lot was just a lot. The air was just air. Whatever had been present, whatever residue or signal or memory the ground had been holding, it was quiet now. Maybe it was the season, maybe it was the database correction. Maybe whatever thread of connection had existed between that phone line and that piece of earth and whatever was underneath it had been severed when the record was erased, like pulling a plug from a wall. Or maybe it was done. Maybe it had said what it needed to say. I folded up the chair and put it in my trunk. I stood at the edge of the lot for a minute, looking at the place where the porch had been. I wanted to say something. I wanted to say goodbye or thank you, or I am sorry I let them tear you down. But nothing I could say with my mouth felt like it matched what I'd been hearing with whatever part of me had been listening. So I just stood there, and I let the wind do what wind does across an empty field, and then I drove home. I still work the overnight board. I still take calls from that same console. Every time a landline call comes in, my heart does a small, involuntary thing, a skip that isn't quite hope and isn't quite dread. It hasn't happened again. The number is gone from the system. The address is gone from the database. The lot is still empty. The void beneath it is still there, as far as I know. Nobody ever followed up. My mother called me last week, which she almost never does. She said she'd been dreaming about the house. She said in the dream she was walking through it, and everything was exactly right. The wallpaper in the kitchen, the stain on the hallway ceiling from the roof leak. In 2004, the way the light came through the living room window in the afternoon. She said she walked into the back bedroom, and I was asleep in the bed, small, 8 or 9 years old, and the hallway light was on, and the window unit was humming, and my grandmother was standing in the doorway, just watching me sleep, with her hand on the door like she was about to close it. She said she woke up and she wasn't sad. She said she felt like she'd been allowed to visit. I didn't tell her about the calls. I didn't tell her about the chair, or the void, or the porch light. But I said, I think the house is still there, Mom. I think it is just somewhere we can't see from the road. She was quiet for a long time, and then she said, I think so too. I've thought a lot about what happened. Whether it was a technical anomaly, a database ghost, a crossing of wires in a system that still had the faint memory of a connection that once existed. Whether it was my own grief finding a channel. Whether the human mind, when it wants badly enough to hear something, can reach into noise and find a voice. But here is what I keep coming back to. The water main story. The thing the child said on the first call. The water is coming up through the floor. I have never told that story to anyone. I have never written it down. It exists in exactly 2 minds, mine and my grandmother's. And she has been dead for 9 years. There is no version of that sentence in any database. No incident report, because the county crew that fixed the main in 1997 didn't file paperwork on the interior flooding of a private home. No letter, no email, no diary entry. That memory was sealed between 2 people, one living and one not, and it came through a phone line. I don't know what that means. I don't know what to do with it. I don't think it is asking me to do anything with it. I think it was just a house that soaked up its years, and then, when nobody was left to listen, found the only line still connected to someone who'd understand. The porch light is still on. That is what I tell myself now, when the overnight board is quiet and the hours are long and the distance between me and every good thing I've ever lost feels wider than it should. The porch light is still on, so I can find my way back. I just don't know where back is anymore, but I think the house does.